Um, I guess the first question is, we obviously haven't seen the repeat of the Sydney protests as some have feared.
Yeah, that's true.
What do you think are the chances we'll see similar events unfold in Perth?
Well, I think that a repeat based on the particular issue involved there is less and less likely as time goes on. That's not to say that you won't have a repeat of this kind of process in the future. I was very encouraged by what looked to me from a distance, using the media, to be a real sense of communication and cooperation between law enforcement and, I assume, intelligence services, ASIO and so forth, and the Islamic communities in their various guises within Sydney, and I assume throughout Australia. So I was quite encouraged by that. And of course we haven't had a repeat of that uncontrolled, violence through the streets. So hopefully that's going to sort of put a lid on that kind of response.
So you think that the police in Sydney did a good job in terms of containing the protest?
Looked pretty good from where I was sitting. But,
yeah, I mean, some people say they've done maybe a too good of a job in terms of actually dealing with certain individuals. There were quite a few bloodied faces and people saying they were too tough.
One thing about the police, of course, or any law enforcement agency, and the individuals in it are subject to the full force of the law, just as any other person is. This is the rule of law for the ruled enforcers. So police, certainly in the kind of pluralist democracy that we've got here, are under more scrutiny than the person in the street. So I know that that's a generalisation, but it seems to me that if you've got a dangerous situation which could have quite easily escalated to a point where they couldn't control it, most people, I would think, including me, say, that's good operational policing, good decision making on the ground to put a lid on it as quickly as possible. Okay, a couple of people got hurt, but a couple of people should not have taken on the police, because there's only one winner where you have trained and prepared law enforcement just for that situation ultimately. It's deadly force at the end of the day. Anyway, go on.
Why do you think it's a bad idea to introduce Sharia law for Muslims?
Do I think it's a bad idea?
Do you think it's a bad idea?
You'd have to. It's an extremely general question. Is it a bad idea? Look, Australia is a, as I say, a plural democracy. It's not a theocracy. It's got a constitution, a basic law, which guides all law in this country. And to the extent that whatever religious affiliations or convictions an individual might have, is that part of a person's life is entirely private in the context of this Australian Constitution, this Australian Federation, and this Australian nation, state, country, whatever you like to say, except where that impinges upon the public sphere and upon the breaching of the laws of this land. So, do I think that Sharia law ought to be introduced for people of the Islamic faith? That's entirely in their purview. It really is. So long as a decision to do that within that community has no deleterious effect upon the body corporate, upon the community of Australia. This is, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau talked about the general will. Now, the general will of this community is for a liberal view of the way this country works. Small L, I might add.
So I guess the danger is if you do introduce it for the so-called Islamic community, I mean, for one, it's not a homogenous community.
Mm. And I'm not saying that supersedes or replaces the laws of the local.
You do think it's a possibility
state,
that could be.
But if you're going to say that the introduction of some elements of that Sharia law replace the law of Australia, I'll say, well, it won't, because the law of Australia will prevail. And if those two clash, if the enforcement of elements of each one clash, there's only one winner in that clash, and that is the law of Australia. So you've got a liberal context, but you've got the operation and the enforcement of Australian law based upon, ultimately, the Australian Constitution.